Just a quick lay of the land coming up in an hour. Governor C.L. Butch Otter is expected to join us. We're talking with him about the unexpected surplus that the state has come round through, or two, I guess I should put it that way. Somewhere between $90 million and $120 million, and we're going to actually try to find out exactly what they plan to do with that in Boise. And some of it may actually end up going into some of those road repairs that he has been in favor of for a good half dozen years. That's, as I say, coming up just after 9 o'clock news this morning on Top Story. Also, Ken Menzel from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department is scheduled to join us in a short while, and he'll have an update about some of the things that they're doing at the Sheriff's Department, maybe some safety concerns, and maybe some people they're actually looking for. And to open the program today, since it remains, I think, a highly controversial subject in the area, I was taking a look through a newspaper out of Boston, Massachusetts this morning before I came on air, and I happened to find a story, and this comes out of Manchester, New Hampshire. Now, those of you who are familiar with the state of New Hampshire, it has a motto. It's on its license plate, and it says, "Live free or die." These are people who really hearken back to a period in American history. They're not like their neighbors in Massachusetts, who have become much more effete. The people in New Hampshire are very direct, very blunt, and you don't mess with them. I used to live next door in Vermont. I have some experience with that. 8 minutes after 8 o'clock, 62. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. This comes from Eric Levinson. He is writing in a newspaper, the Boston Globe. And he says it was a quiet afternoon at this unassuming strip mall not far from the main commercial strip in Manchester, New Hampshire, which includes a Chuck E. Cheese's and a Hobby Lobby, but the sidewalk in front of one specific building was crowded with men holding guns. There were nearly a dozen of them, a mix of some law enforcement officers and military veterans. It started with 4 men on Monday morning, the writer says. And then he went on to say that they had been working shifts. The place they stand had come to protect was outlined, or that they'd come to protect was outlined in bright red letters and a sign posted above their heads, Armed Services Career Center. A spokesperson for the Marine Corps Recruiting Command, in other words, tell the liberal newspaper folks what they want to hear, said recruitment offices had made their own necessary adjustments for security, and he is discouraging people from standing by their offices. But nobody is actually going out there and saying, "Hey guys, get away." Now the newspaper wants to portray this as a bunch of kooks with guns walking around, and good golly, there's a Chuck E. Cheese nearby, and the children are going to be so frightened. Most of these people, as the writer did admit, are law enforcement, and they were one time, many of them, in the military. So it's not exactly, I read in the New York Times, which used to be the sister paper to the Boston Globe today, the New York Times made a reference to it being civilians. Well, if these people are ex-Army and Marine Corps, I don't know about calling them civilians. They probably know quite well how to handle the firearms that they happen to have. Maybe for a better outlook of what's going on there, you have to go way down to almost the end of the story. And the writer says, in Manchester, police said they were staying neutral on the volunteer presence. In other words, they're okay with it. 8:10. I want to tell you right now, we're dealing with some people out here who definitely, on the American left, are starting to see it all unravel, whether it be after the shooting in Chattanooga last week, whether it be after those videos from Planned Parenthood, and after all the lies that are now coming out about this Iranian deal. I think people are starting to put a thought into their heads that something's not quite right with what the American left has been trying to do with the engineering process it has been undertaking. And I share that with you because Rush Limbaugh was talking about this poll yesterday that the Washington Post reported, and I actually happened to get a chance to look it all over this morning. Most Americans are uncomfortable with the direction that the country is going on social issues. Most Americans, overwhelmingly, and even a lot of Democrats. Also, especially, the Post is reporting that it's younger folks who in large numbers are uncomfortable, and also minorities who are uncomfortable. Shouldn't that be a wake-up call? And maybe we need a candidate in the Republican field who can call attention to all of this. Oh, wait a second. One is. And his name is not Lindsey Graham or Rick Perry or Ted Cruz. Cruz is sort of quietly sitting by the sidelines and letting Donald Trump do all of the heavy lifting. But I'm telling you right now, What we're seeing here is that one person is coming out and basically speaking truth to the American people, while the rest of them just happen to be flailing around. I have a caller with us already. I hadn't planned on that, but you're welcome to join me on the program. In fact, before we get to this first caller, let me share the number, 736-0300. And you're on the air on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com.
Yeah, Bill, thanks for taking my call early. I got things I got to get done. But what you just said is what's going on with the country. See, people are getting tired of the government not protecting us, not, against the illegal aliens, against the drug dealers. They're sweeping everything under the rug. Well, people are getting a gutful of this crap, and they're going to start standing up. Now, if you look at the Second Amendment, it talks about a militia. The people got to have to take care of themselves. Now, I'm not saying go to war. I'm not saying we're going to start shooting people. But if it takes standing someplace with a gun, like if I go to church, if I was to go to Chuck E. Cheese, if I was to go to the courthouse, I have a pistol. Now, and I got a concealed weapons permit. And it's not there because I'm, macho John Wayne. It's there because something could happen. You don't know what's going to happen in this world anymore. And to start slamming on these people for standing out there with a gun, all they're doing is protecting their friends and themselves. And that's what's going to be coming with this country, because Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid and Boehner, a lot of the Republicans, they're not going to do it for you, folks. And if you ain't got what it takes to stand up and protect yourself, if you're going to sit back and wait for them to do it, you're crazy, because you're going to get hurt.
Well, thank you much for the call. And as he said, these other people in government aren't going to be doing it for you. Their view of government is to tell you disarm yourself and that they will protect you, but they really won't. That's just in order for them to better control you as far as all of this goes. I had a friend a number of years ago. He did not own any firearms, and one night he was driving. He was about an hour to an hour and a half away from home. He was driving back from visiting some people that he knew, and he was driving back to see his family that evening, and he decided to stop at a gas station in a suburban neighborhood, which was not known for high crime. But the gas station was under renovation, so they'd put porta potties up behind it. So you had to use those if you needed to use the facility. So he went around back after filling up with gasoline, not coffee or something like that would force him to run out back. But he drove around back, and he got out of the car, and while he was in the porta-john, he heard the squealing of tires coming in right behind him. And when he got out, two guys had jumped out of a car, and they had pipes. They were going to beat him over the head and rob him. He said, luckily, they got out on the wrong side, and he was able to jump into his car and speed away. After that, he went and he got his permit, and he's been carrying ever since. And you know what? If someone ever tries that with him again, don't bring a pipe to a gunfight. That's all you can say. Talking about how the left views all of these things, I happened to come across this morning. My friend, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Heil, who has been on the program with us a number of times, happened to share this. This is an audio from a woman online who calls herself Liberal Chick. At first, I thought it was a joke. But no, she's quite serious.
I agree with Obama. Marines shouldn't wear their uniforms in public because it offends Muslims. And you know what happens when Muslims get angry. Hashtag say what? Hashtag common sense. Hashtag Hillary 2016.
What doesn't offend Muslims? I mean, after all, in England, they're already upset when they go to the airport that there are sniffer dogs. Anna Workman made a comment to me last night about this on Facebook. She said, let's see, they don't like dogs, they don't like pigs, they don't like lipstick. What doesn't offend them? I mean, really, she said there's something really, really wrong with the culture that takes that particular approach. Did I also mention today? No, I haven't yet. That the Board of Trustees at CSI are now making national headlines for trying to shut down any dissent at their meetings by limiting the amount of time people have to speak. And there's a new rule that says if you have talked in the last 60 days, you cannot talk before the board during the public hearing portion. So they're cutting down the time. They're limiting how often you can come and speak. And now they also want you to get a note from your mommy. Well, it's so similar. They want you 48 hours in advance so they can, I guess, create a new rule if they don't like what you're going to say. The College of, what do they call it? College of Cowardly Communists? That might be a much, much better phrase to apply to CSI. We'll just call it CCC from here on out. Breitbart, by the way, says that in Chattanooga, Tennessee, firearms are flying off the shelves. People have decided they are going to protect themselves. This morning, the FBI said ISIS is now the greatest national security threat that we have. And, of course, it has a great many adherents here in the United States. Why don't we bring 300 more of them in this coming October? Why not? What the heck? We'll just, better to fight them here, I guess, than over there. Is that the outlook? Is that the impression these people are trying to give? Here you've got a headline, again, coming out of Boston, Massachusetts, but this one from Fox. Moderate imam reveals how radicals won battle for soul of Boston mosques. This guy says that 20-some years ago, he was leading a mosque, and he said that it was a fairly standard type of thing. People came and prayed on Friday. They had some social activities and the like. And he says eventually he was pushed out. New people arrived. They were radicalized. They managed to convince everyone else, all the other members of the mosque, that this guy was just too soft and that he didn't have enough in him when it came to chanting, I guess, death to America. So he was pushed out. And he's given an interview to Brooke Singman from Fox. And if you check this out today, you'll find this likely on a number of different websites. You may find it at Drudge, Real Clear Politics, and some other locations. But he says that he was basically told he had to leave the Islamic Center of New England. So now we have them working there too as well. This is going to be going on across the country. In England, ISIS is now saying it's going to be bombing various parades and gatherings and public festivals using drones, using drone technology. And simply, they'll go into somebody's backyard, fire it up, and they'll fly it a few blocks away to wherever the parade is going on, and they'll drop their bombs. And the British have to take this one seriously. How can you avoid that? And once again, when Europe decided to let all of these people in 30 years ago, it was done because it was said it would be compassionate. And we have to be nice to everyone. And they don't mean us any harm whatsoever. And then they all came and they bred like rabbits, and now they control most of the major cities of Europe. I'm sorry, folks, but when they get to that tipping point, it's over for the rest of us. It's over for the rest of us. And then they're going to come into our churches, smash our reliquaries, our statues, and our altars, and likely burn them down. I mean, this is what they're doing elsewhere around the world. Crisis Magazine. The laws of several Western countries, the writer says, besides the Islamic ones themselves, do not permit anything critical to be said of Islam, which is what we're seeing more and more of in this country. You're not supposed to criticize them because that's mean-spirited. The writer says such laws forbid what is called hate speech. They often include other subgroups like homosexuals, women, or race. Such laws and customs have practically reduced responsible freedom of speech to a dead letter. Fines and jail sentences are passed out if such laws are violated. And he says almost every public, academic, or media talk of Islam goes something like this. Most Muslims are peaceful. The violence comes from terrorists. And then number two, those whom we identify as terrorists are not true Muslims. That's the politically correct approach to all of it. Why not just wave a white flag and get it all over with right away? Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Governor Otter coming up in about 45 minutes. Ken Menzel in about 15 minutes. Hope you can stick around. Hey, related to what we were talking about in the last segment of the program, got a couple of things I wanted to share with you quickly. There are hearings going on right now in Washington. Of course, President Obama and his team went to the United Nations first in order to sell the Iran deal. And now they'd like the U.S. Senate to sign off on this and saying, well, if you don't do it, you'll insult us before the United Nations, which is was a bit of a slick sort of trick to try and get to put pressure on members of the Senate to go along with this. But here's a couple of things that should make us a little leery of what's going on there. A Washington Examiner headline, Kerry doesn't know what's in the Iran side deal. Paragraph 2. Representative Mike Pompeo said Kerry told legislators, this was yesterday, there was a closed-door meeting, that he has not read the side deals, never possessed a copy of them, and approved the nuclear agreement without knowing their details. Hello. I mean, these people just had a rally on Saturday screaming death to America. Their supreme leader was there, and as well as death to Israel. And now Kerry says, well, I didn't read the whole agreement. He negotiated it, he says, but he didn't read the whole agreement. And then check this out. Also from the very same newspaper, this is an editorial. Before the deal was struck, the writer says, the Obama White House had promised much more, quote, anytime, anywhere, unquote, inspections on demand. When asked about this on Sunday, the Secretary of State displayed symptoms of amnesia. Quote, this is a term that, honestly, I never heard in the 4 years that we were negotiating, unquote. Here's another. quote, "It was not on the table. There is no such thing in arms control as anytime, anywhere," unquote. And the writer says, barring a genuine brain malady, there is no gentle way of skirting around the fact that this is a lie. So they want people to approve this after all of this. This is mind-numbing. 8:25. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 13. How dang dumb do they think we are? Well, of course, they're in Washington. I guess they probably look around who's surrounding them and make some conclusions. 63. You're on the air on Top Story.
Good morning, Bill. Hey, my question in this whole nuclear deal, and maybe you know this, and the $150 billion that Iran's going to get over the next however long, is that all coming from the U.S. or is it the UN? And if it is coming from us, shouldn't Congress have a say in that?
A large chunk of it's obviously coming from us. Even if it was the United Nations, we fund the United Nations. Everyone else just kind of sits back and lives off that.
We got to raise taxes so that we can give free community college to everybody. How many community college kids can we put through school at $150 billion?
Yeah. Well, they'll just print more money. Or borrow more from China.
Right.
Hey, thank you much for the call. I guess the Chinese might defend us if Iran tries to hit us with some nuclear weapons, because the Chinese would still like to get the money back. Maybe that's the whole Obama rationale behind all of this. Victor Davis Hanson, who I quote sometimes on the program, he's a professor at Stanford University, and if you ever watch the History Channel, he's got a lot of background when it comes to warfare and history and the like, and he's often one of the talking heads you see in all of these various throughout history, these documentaries, I think going all the way back to the Battle of Jericho. He's in some of these documentaries, and they trace the history of warfare in the one series, and he's frequently seen in those shows. But he says appeasement always brings short-term jubilation at the expense of long-term security. The appeasement of autocrats always pulls the rug out from under domestic reformers and idealists. After the Western capitulation at Munich, no dissenter in Germany dared to question the ascendant dictatorship of Adolf Hitler. And he says, expect a Nobel Peace Prize for Kerry, followed by a Chamberlain-like infamy later, because he says this is actually going to lead us to war. He says that this is going to allow the Iranians to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And he points out if someone had stood up to Hitler between 1936 and 1939 and just said no, you may never have had World War II. But here you've got our government giving these people everything they want. And of course, if you look at all the big East Coast newspapers and you read their op-ed pages, they're all telling you, well, this is wonderful. This will avert war. This will avoid war. How? The other guys are still saying they're going to wipe us out. I'm sorry, but they don't sound like they really mean it. When they come out and they scream death to America, death to Israel, somehow I have a funny feeling that they're not really planning to play nice down the road. The writer says until last week, Iranian dissidents and reformers had blamed their government for earning the status abroad that it has and economic ruin at home. Not now. He says there were plenty of alternatives short of war in dealing with Hitler, but none after. And so here you've got your own government selling you out, and then you've got this Herman Munster character sitting in the Secretary of State's chair who says, well, I didn't read the whole deal. And I don't recall that the president promised that we would be able to have inspections anytime, anywhere. No. Gee, I was breaking my leg that day. I don't have any recollection whatsoever. Got about 30 seconds. You're on the air on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Yes, I think that $150 billion is what Iran will be able to get because of the sanctions that are going to be lifted, either because they can export or they can import and sell and improve their economy. I don't think that number is coming from our government.
I'll have to double-check that, too, as well. Thank you much for the input. No matter how you look at it, they're going to have a lot more money available to build all sorts of nasty things that they could then throw at us. 8:30. Bill Colley with you. By the way, we've got a guest tomorrow who grew up in Iran, at least until he was about 10, 12 years old. And Pastor Shahram Hadian is going to be joining us, spend about 15 minutes with us on the air. He's coming to Twin Falls next week, and he'll be previewing that visit. He's already getting the ire up among the Council of American Islamic Relations about his upcoming visit. Should be very exciting. Ken Menzel is going to be visiting us in just about 4 minutes.